Hi, I want to talk about healer balance in Guild Wars 2 PvE, and specifically about Heal Chronomancer, a build that's really excelling right now in that environment, perhaps a little bit too much so, and potentially what balance decisions can be made about that to bring it into a better spot currently. Hi, I'm Darshi. I write for a website called Snowcrows. That's a build and guide website for Guild Wars 2. I also raid every week. I try to complete all of the raid content every week and try to play as many different builds as possible when I do it to sort of keep myself open. I specialize in writing pages for heal builds for the website. For Berserker, for Scrapper, for Willbender. I've done a couple now. I don't really speak for the website here. I just kind of want to talk about Heal Chronomancer and go over what I think is a little bit too strong about it right now and what can be done about that. A lot of credit for this goes to Yulian and the Snowcrows page he's made for it. I've used that as a jumping off point. I've used that as what I'm using in-game to get all of this. Obviously, there's a lot of different utility swaps that will be made with that. That all goes down in that website. So super good utility. I recommend it a lot to anybody who's trying to pick up this build. I also kind of recommend picking up this build. I'm vouching for its strength at the moment, am I not? With that all aside, here's an outline I'm going to go by now. I want to talk about the endgame group composition in general, the healer's role within it, then specific examples of utility, how much utility is available to builds, some balancing options I want to go down, and conclude there. So, in this kind of content, you're going to be dealing with yourself and 9 of your friends, 10 players total, fighting some big boss enemy and all of the minions they've brought to the fight as well. Sabbath's Bandits, Minister these Purists, Xera's Phantasms and White Mantle reinforcements, all of that. The entire time you're doing this, that boss has millions of HP, so it's going to last a while. You're going to have a bunch of people engaging, doing as much damage as they can, and it's still going to be a couple of minutes, at least. So, during this entire time, nobody's allowed to waypoint if they get defeated, and if you get defeated, you cannot resurrect that player as well. So you can't make any big mistakes that would defeat you. Otherwise, you are just subtracted from the encounter, and if they can't beat it without you, then you have to try again. This makes for difficult content that, once you learn how to deal with it, can be reliably completed, which makes for a really satisfying bit of content there. There's going to be difficult mechanics presented to the players that they're going to have to learn to overcome, and I love it to death. I love doing these so much because over the years, ArenaNet has presented a lot of different stuff that's really fun to solve the puzzle for. Now that's going to be raids, it's going to be strikes, it's going to be fractals. Fractals are a little different. They break a bunch of these rules. You actually are allowed to resurrect people. You can't, there's no waypoints, but you can resurrect people in combat. And it's 5 people instead of 10, and the fights are a lot shorter. But aside from that, they are relatively the same. Now, theoretically, an optimal PvE composition is going to be 10 people doing as much damage as you can. You get 10 people, bring up damage build, and you just kill the boss as quickly as possible. Sometimes this is actually a thing you can do, but most of the time bosses fight back. ArenaNet intelligently made the bosses actually try to kill you too, and do a bunch of interesting ways to make that happen. So generally, you're going to be taking damage as well, so you have to dedicate players to dealing with that. Also, boons are a part of Guild Wars. Your damage players aren't going to be doing as much damage as they can without them. and are not going to survive as easily or move around the arena, so on. You need might, you need fury, just to make each individual skill do as much damage as it's supposed to. You're going to need quickness and alacrity to cast them as quickly as you need to and as often as you need to, so that your rotation actually works at its fullest. Protection and regeneration are generally going to be necessary to keep people alive through especially high damage situations in these raids. You're going to need swiftness to get around the arena because most raids are going to require you to actually move around, not just stand still. Vigor is going to help people dodge more often. If you don't have it, that means that you're just not going to be able to dodge all of the mechanics. There's also a couple of DPS builds that need Vigor to do their best damage. So if you can't provide that, then that's a disadvantage as well. Resolution and resistance both help deal with condition pressure from enemies. So situationally, they can be really, really helpful as well. And Aegis and stability will help prevent hits, prevent CC from enemies, and help you actually ignore a couple mechanics, or at least protect against them. So we want any of our heal builds to be able to bring as many of these as possible. So what a healer is they're going to take their gear, they're going to change the stats to something that's going to increase healing and increase the duration of boons they apply so that they can heal the squad and grant the squad boons. Since their damage is also really low, they can take utility items without scrapping as much of the composition's overall outgoing damage, so they're the first people you're going to look to provide utility as well. So, which professions are able to actually output enough healing? As it turns out, pretty much everything at this point. There's been a bring the player, not the class, design principle in for a while, and as part of that, they've been trying to get healing onto every profession. They've pretty much succeeded there. Warrior got a staff, and a couple of reworks to especially its discipline line that are really, really helping it get out enough healing for people. Guardian and Revenant have both always excelled in that since they were introduced. They have enough healing. Ranger was mostly Druid at first, but the Staff and Mace with Weapon Master and Soto, as well as its specs getting other tweaks, has made it so that just about all of them can actually heal people. Thief got a Scepter. With Weapon Master, everybody gets that Scepter. It's pretty good for that output too. Engineer had always excelled in that. Necromancer has Scourge. The other two are kind of left behind with that, but Scourge has good healing output. Elementalist has always got good output. And Mesmer's gotten an Inspiration trait line rework that helped it out a lot. And then Rifle, which is also doing a good for healing as well. What about boons? Which professions provide boons? So generally, Alacrity and Quickness are the ones that are going to gate any support build in this game for PvE, because they've designed it such that only one of those are available to a profession at a time. You cannot have both, and you need both, so you're going to have to bring one or the other. If you've brought a healer without either of them, that means somebody else has to pick up the slack now, and generally that kind of composition creep, composition bloat, isn't a thing people are looking for when they comp out a group. So, generally speaking, we take healers that can cover one of those. That would be these. These are all of the 18 professions of the game that cover Alacrity or Quickness. As for the other boon suites, some of them are a little bit weaker in that regard. That'd be these four. These remaining 14 are the ones that are going to cover all of the boons that we really, really want to have as a healer in the game. So which builds provide utility? So utility is a little tricky to define. It's going to be any specific piece of a kit that normally wouldn't be necessary at all, but is situationally necessary to complete an encounter efficiently, comfortably, or in some cases at all. There's actually going to be a lot of encounters out there that need some sort of thing to be brought in order for them to work. An example of this would be Matthias Gabriel in Wing 2. Right away, at the start of the fight, he's going to get Blood Shield, and if you can't reflect projectiles back at him, that's never going to go away, and he will never take another point of damage, you will not be able to complete the fight. So utility is going to be something that lets you get through specific checks like that. So what are some examples of utility? That's a bunch of fight-specific stuff like knocking back enemies, ripping boons off of enemies, pulling them together, granting Aegis stability, condition cleansing, denying enemy projectiles with something like a reflect, portals, invisibility for the group, defiance break to deal with break bars, teleportation, invulnerability, or even just cooldown reduction for yourself. This is obviously a bit of a biased framing device here, but this is everything Chronomancer can do on top of just being an effective healer. If you want a bit better of a framing device, we can use something like this. So, if we take this whole list piece by piece, this is a comparison of a bunch of different utility pieces in Guild Wars 2 between all of the 18 professions that do one of the necessary boons, quickness or alacrity. If you look at it, there's a couple of gaps that are missing on a bunch of different professions that can generally be healthy. But Chronomancer, specifically, is excelling above other professions in a lot of specific jobs. Now, stability and Aegis, it's giving as much as its best competitor, Firebrand, and it's got the only pulsing Aegis skill in the game. It's one of the best CC builds in the game. It has the best AoE pull on Focus 4 Into the Void. It's got some of the strongest boon removal, and it's got 2 different things that do it. Reflex, it's got portals, it's got group invis, invuln, cooldown reduction, it's the only one that gets better alacrity. And it has access to both mimic and continuum split. So it is a extremely strong build in that regard. Notably, a lot of other things are missing a lot of things to compete on the same floor as well. If you look at these bottom 5 zones, you'll realize these are a lot of things Chronomancer does, Mesmer does, that nobody else really does much of at all. Guardian's got Reflex, and then past that, it's just kind of open season. It's just Mesmer, and Chrono's better than Mirage for it because of the cooldown reduction. This is more or less why Chrono specifically is just kind of the best pick right now. So overall, Chronomancer's in a really, really strong position right now because of its comparatively strong utility suite that it's got, and the complete basic lack of gaps in its coverage as well. The only things it cannot do is control downstate teammates or apply its boons at faraway ranges, which are things that can usually be worked around anyway, or avoided in the case of people going down. So overall, it's an extremely strong performer right now because it effectively has no weaknesses. But it goes a little further than that because we have to talk about availability of the utility now. Some builds just have an easier or harder time actually taking those utility items that they want to have. For some builds, it's actually tied into the kit. So if you wanted to daze something as a druid, you already have Celestial Avatar, just go in, hit it with a Lunar Impact, it's dazed now. If you need to give stability on a Firebrand, you always have it. It's part of Unbroken Lines, go into Tome of Courage, press 5. Stuff like that, where it's already built into the kit, or if you've already taken it for some other reason to help tie around the build. Super speed on Scrapper would be something like that. Some builds have to make trade-offs to get the things they want. If they have a slot that's already full, that means they have to drop something to get something else. Generally speaking, if you want to look at a free slot that's open for utility, if you go onto a Snowcrow's build page and you see these open slots that don't have anything in them, that means you can put anything there that you want. Now, Chronomancer has 5 of them, basically. The only one that really kind of is debatable is the heal slot, which is probably going to be a mantra. You can still do swiftness uptime without a mantra there, but like anything could be in those right slots and the build would function. Which means Chronomancer has complete access to all of this at no cost, which means it can kind of run the show. So, Heal Chronomancer is really strong right now. What can actually be done about the build to bring it back in line? What can be changed about it? We got a couple different balance levers for heal builds. Generally, there's 4. We can either try nerfing the healing down to a lower level. We could try nerfing its boon output, giving it less boons it can give people. You could try nerfing utility items that it's got directly, or nerfing its utility access to give it less of them that it can get at a time. Nerfing the healing of Heal Chronomancer is going to be a bad idea. So Heal Chronomancer healing per second isn't that strong now anyway. If you take it down any further, you're going to take it into the territory where it becomes a liability for groups that really need that healing. That's going to be inexperienced groups or groups on high damaging encounters. So you're going to create a point where the utility of Heal Chronomancer is always going to be good, but sometimes it's not enough to keep people alive. And the healing output isn't the reason the build is strong. If all of the problems with the build are it can do everything, nerfing its healing output only serves to just make it so that only good groups get to take advantage of that. And it doesn't really solve your utility imbalance because it's still going to be the optimal take most of the time. And for those groups that do not have the experience to avoid enough damage to make it work, it's going to create a lot of pain points for those people. I would prefer not to see that. I think that's going to be a pretty unfortunate experience for people if you actually did take the healing of the build down. So, next, you could try nerfing boon output. Fortunately, that's probably going to be a bad idea as well, because Heal Chronomancer doesn't really have anything good to take away. If you tried to take away something niche, like a Vigor, for example, that would only really punish people who need to have Vigor. Since the build has a lot of access to Aegis and stability, there's less that it needs to dodge anyway. So the only people who that's going to hurt is people like a Daredevil or a Vindicator or Mirage who really want to have Vigor out time. And Heal Chronomancer's boon output isn't particularly strong anyway. Like, it does all of the boons it needs to do, but it hasn't got resolution, resistance is part uptime on one skill, stuff like that, right? Its swiftness output is reliant on a relic. It needs Relic of Febe in order to provide swiftness at all. It doesn't have access to it otherwise. So there's not really any good candidates to get rid of to bring the build down. And if you got rid of something important like Might or Fury, that would actually be really, really harmful for the build, because now that's something that groups need to have. That's not a non-negotiable. So that just removes it from a healer conversation unless you can bring something else to supplant that. At which point, it still has all the utility anyway. So next, you could try nerfing utility skills. While I think there's a couple things you could tweak here, it's not going to work on its own, and I think it's not a great idea to try to make it work on its own. A lot of people have been attached to these utility skills. We've had most of these things since their core Mesmer kit, since the game launched. And raid strats have been developed for these for 9 years now. A very long time. People have gotten used to practicing with them. Strategies have been developed with these skills in mind since these fights have been introduced. Things like two-way teleportation, two-way portals, invulnerability access, and projectile reflex on Mesmer are crucial. They're critical for some fights working. So if you were to get rid of them, that loss would be felt. So you could try parity nerfs. I think these are going to be the ones that will work better. Parity nerf. You nerf a nerf to a skill that's competing with another one to get it back to the level of what it's competing against. You could take something that Mesmer is doing best and take it down to something to a level lower so it's fine. 5-man invisibility. Things like that. Nerfs to cooldown reduction on Chronomancer. Improved alacrity would be the holy grail of this. If you're willing to get it onto Mirage's level, that would probably need to be reworked in some way. Defiance Break is something that Chronomancer does extremely well right now. So some nerfs to some of its CC skills would probably be in order. Its stability output is extremely high right now and could stand to be reduced. And its Aegis output as well. So the biggest change I would do to heal Chronomancer to bring it down to the level of the other healers is nerfing its access to utility. The concept here is pretty simple. You're going to try to fill those empty slots with a skill that it needs to take. Boons are the most non-negotiable part of a healer's kit, so this is what I'd recommend trying to push there. My ideas would be, Well of Action already exists. It grants Might, it grants Fury, and Super Speed at the end of its duration. And currently the build doesn't actually need to take it. Rifle 3 and F1, especially with Continuum Split, are going to be enough to ramp its Might. And if you have Might from somebody else, you don't even need the F5, because Rifle 3 and F1 are going to maintain 25 Might permanently. So if you were to remove the boons from Rifle 3 Inspiring Imagery, you would have to take the Well. And you'd probably also have to take Shield for the Might as well to get to 25, meaning that there'd be a trade-off for Focus as well. I think that's a good idea. I think you should rework Rifle 3 into being a heal skill with Abstraction being a barrier skill. That way, you would have to take Well of Action in one of your slots. Now, Well of Senility is a skill that is redundant in a way. We have Boon Rip on Nullfield already. We have CC on a number of different Chronomancer skills, so I suggest we rework that skill into a source of protection and regeneration. Once that's done, you can make it necessary by removing regeneration and protection from the Chaos trait line and from Rifle 2's Journey. You could probably put Swiftness on Journey instead. Currently, Swiftness is not part of Heal Chronomancer's kit anywhere. I would like to see that increased because after all of these changes, letting it free up the Relic slot is probably going to be okay. Also, the skill's called Journey. I feel like Swiftness is at least fitting. Once you did all this, you only have one remaining utility slot on the bar for utility use so that the crushing weight of Mesmer's utility kit is at least kept back somewhat by slots that you have to take to keep boons up. Now, if somebody else was able to cover one of those, you'd be able to open one of those up so it's not rigid, but it at least helps out in default. There are a couple skills I specifically would like to see nerfed anyway. Specifically, I think Mantra of Concentration, Bountiful Disillusionment need to provide less total stacks of stability. And Well of Precognition also still has 3 stacks of stability as well. It's currently the only pulsing Aegis source in the game as well. That makes it the single best Aegis skill. None of the other ones provide it more than once. This one provides it each pulse of the Well. So what could be done about that would be to take it and somehow make it provide a single Aegis application and pulse maybe its 3 stability over the duration. It would probably be safer. Signet of Humility is currently a 1200 range, non-projectile, 600 Defiance break skill on a minute cooldown. It's very strong and basically free as well. It's only really competing against invisibility in the elite slot. So some sort of nerf to this could also be helpful. I recommend bringing it to like 400-ish. So that'd be like 520 with a paralyzation sigil, which is pretty close to the CC contribution of Gravity Well. Mass Invisibility needs to be a 5-target skill. That way, Thief, Invisibility, and Scrapper, and so on get to also have a spot in the light. Distortion. This one's a bit of a long shot, but it is worth looking at. Every other source of invulnerability in the game requires the user to stop what they are doing and channel it. If they stop channeling it to do something else, they are no longer invulnerable. Some of them are total transformations that make it so they can't even cast instant cast skills, like Mist Form on Elementalist, for example. I would suggest looking at possibly making Distortion a channel. Now, enough talk of nerfs, let's also talk about parity buffs. Other professions have skills that are similar but not as strong as those of Mesmer and Chronomancer. Probably one of the best examples of this is Focus 4 on Mesmer, Into the Void. A lot of other professions have AoE pulls that do not function as well. If you made them larger, that would help. Examples could be stuff like Shadowfall, Magnetic Shield, Call to Anguish, Glyph of the Tides, Dragon's Maw through Magnetic Bomb, Prismatic Singularity. There are other examples out there as well. If even some of these were made as strong as Into the Void with a 600 radius pull, they would be able to complete the same mechanics that a Mesmer can without introducing new design space. They would just be a stronger pull. Portal Enter. Portals have been the exclusive domain of Mesmers for a very long time. When Thief Traps got reworked into Preparations, we got our first ever placeable portal that was not pink. Scourges also have a sand portal, which is actually a ground target, which means it is not as strong either, despite being two-way. I would recommend get Shadow Portal two-way functionality so it could be used for all of the strategies that a Mesmer's portal is. It would still be weaker too, because it has a 3-second delay on its placement and so on. And other professions should be considered for other portal-like skills. You could have a Storm for Elementalist, or a Teleporter machine dropped by engineers. Something like that would help free up this design space as well, so that it's more options for people to take. I would consider stability and Aegis options for professions that lack them. You have the entirety of Thief cannot give Aegis. There is no Aegis present on Thief at all. Untamed can't grant stability, despite the fact that Druid has multiple stability skills in its glyphs. So a heal Untamed still can't function at a lot of encounters, like Cairn the Indomitable, where people want stability for the group. And there's a bunch of other examples throughout as well. Those are my two biggest standouts, though. I would consider AoE projectile denial options for other professions, especially Reflex, considering that there are certain encounters that need it to specifically be a Reflect to work. Matthias being the biggest example. There's a lot of classes that don't have access to AoE projectile hate at all, especially Reflex. I would also consider support buffs targeting Mirage, Deadeye, Untamed, Bladesworn, and Harbinger, all of who are underperforming as healers right now. A lot of these builds either don't have the boons necessary, don't have the healing necessary, both in the case of Harbinger, or the utility kit necessary to make them a desirable pick. I would also consider new utility skills in future expansions to meet some of these. Currently, we've had a lot of weapons get added, Post EOD as an expansion feature. We've had weapon master, weapon proficiency expansion, and we've had spears. I think some new skills on the right side of our bar could be the next step. Now, it's also worth mentioning that there are relics that have been introduced. A lot of relics have these kinds of utility pieces and bonuses on them, but despite that, a lot of them aren't actually good enough to handle the mechanics that they would be replacing those for. Wizard's Tower is one of my best examples here. Relic of the Wizard's Tower grants a pull and an area reflect around the user when it's cast. When an elite is cast specifically. So the problem there is the field lasts for 4 seconds, which is too short for a lot of things you need reflects for like Matthias, for example. So it can't beat that, despite basically being made for something like that. And also, if it could, a lot of builds still couldn't take it anyway, because they want to use their elite slot for something else. Or, in the case of something like a Mechanist, they can't even activate that relic. A lot of professions have some weird interaction with the skill. Engineer is the weirdest one, where it has kits that replace those slots. You have a heal kit and a mortar kit as a Mechanist, and you have a mech in the way of the skills that would inherit that slot. So now you don't have anything that can trigger those relics. And even if you did have something with the right cooldown, and the relic was on there, and the relic worked for what you needed it to, now it's overrided the purpose of the skill that would be in that slot, so the purity of purpose is gone. They're a very awkward way to give more pieces of utility to a profession, so I don't recommend them as the primary way that that's going to be achieved. Targeted changes to these builds is going to be more beneficial. So, in conclusion, healers in PvE are expected to bring utility with their kit, and Heal Chronomancer currently has the best options and brings the most of them at once. You can bring it in line by locking down free slots, so it has less access to its utility kit at once, and you can do so by making it take wells for boon up time. Certain utilities on Mesmer can also be nerfed to bring that in line with its competitors. Cooldown reduction, especially improved alacrity, is going to be problematic for balance, and Heal Mirage especially is not going to make a breakout unless that is addressed somehow. Mirage will also need compensatory buffs if the proposed Chaos and Rifle nerfs are actually put through, because it will lose access to those boons. Effervescence could be a good place to put them onto. Other professions are going to need to receive new utility skills to compete with high utility builds like Heal Chronomancer, and relics, while helpful, will only be a half measure. Also, I'd like to say, a lot of the recent balance patches for Guild Wars 2 haven't really been addressing healing builds in PvE, despite the large disparity between the builds. I would like to see more of that, because there is this kind of disparity, especially in the utility department. There's been a lot of good work that's been done to bring that gap between healing output and boon output to each profession closer together, bring the underperformers up. At the beginning of End of Dragons, Guild Wars released a blog post describing a philosophy of bring the player, not the class. They wanted each player's favorite profession to be able to perform the roles necessary for a group to work in endgame. A lot of work's been done there to bring those up to the level necessary to make it work. If you want to play a thief and someone says, we need a healer, you have a build that works now. Unless you're playing Deimos CM and you need Aegis, and suddenly now you have to switch to something else that has Aegis because you don't. I appreciate a lot of those changes immensely, but currently there's just not been enough to keep up to date with that stuff. Healers make up a fifth of raid strike squads, and in fractal parties as well. As long as builds have these gap in capability, they're going to be forced to pick the best ones or operate at a deficit. I would like to request continued focus on this aspect of the game because there are still changes necessary to be made to get it to the point that they ascribed to back at the beginning of End of Dragons. It's been a joy to write guide content for healers in this game, to share what I know, share what I find. I want to keep doing it. I'd like to keep doing it with new stuff that comes out over time, but over the past half a year, there has not actually been anything new for healers, generally speaking. I would like to see more. And I would be super stoked when I do. Thank you. I'm Darshi. I've had a great time doing this, and I look forward to what balanced decisions may eventually get made to help keep the game healthy. Thank you for listening.